Now, next up are Lieutenant Colonel Colin Henderson and Major Brodie Henderson with A Tale of Two Gliders.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us here. It's an absolutely surreal and special experience to be present here at the Air Force Academy and with the invite of the National World War II Glider Pilots Committee. As grads ourselves here, 2002, and my wife is
2008.
It's a truly unique homecoming to be here, and not only just to be back at our alma mater, but to actually be here supporting and telling the story of a passion of ours, of a moment in history, and continuing that legacy. So what we have for you today is A Tale of Two TG-3s, and it's about a glider, but it's also a story of a journey that we found ourselves on that is remarkably introspective and circuitous, and it continues to surprise us, perhaps not unexpectedly, or perhaps unexpectedly, but it doesn't surprise us.
Not surprising.
That we keep coming full circle in so many things in our life that all bring us back to this point and this interest and this passion of telling this story from our backgrounds. And just to segue from what Andrew was just speaking about, that training, it's near and dear to my heart because I was a soaring instructor pilot here when I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy, and I've been an instructor in my Air Force career. So telling this story of training and carrying on that legacy to a future generation is so critically important to me. And like I said, it's a passion that has been ignited in us, and we're so happy to tell this story. So moving on.
All right, let me go ahead and share this.
All right. So as the slide is coming up, I'd like to say the way that I mentioned this circuitous story of my experience, one of the most surreal moments today happened on the staff tower at lunch, and getting to stand up there with Curtis. Are we good?
Is that sharing?
Is the screen good?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, just a moment of technical difficulty. We'll get the screen shared in a moment. I started to tell you about this is a journey that we've been on, and it's about gliders, but it's also uniquely introspective because it all comes full circle again to this training mentality and preserving this legacy of the gliders. So on that note, I mentioned, thank you to Andrew and to Jeremy for setting this up and getting us on the staff tower today to have lunch. And when I was a cadet, back during my freshman year, I remember being here and being on the floor of Mitchell Hall. And I believe this was December of 1998. And fortuitously, my dad found this article last night, and he had scanned it at some point. And this is an article about the first time that the glider wings were reissued to cadets in 1998. And I remember being there and seeing this presentation by the National World War II Glider Pilots Association and thinking, that is so cool, because I was interested in history and I was interested in gliders, and we'll get to that in a moment. But the fact that these wings were being reissued to honor the veterans and then carry that service forward was just phenomenal to me. So today, this is what is just absolutely amazing, is that we had the privilege to be on the staff tower at lunch in Mitchell Hall today as Curtis was recognized for his contributions in World War II and his amazing service, and he was awarded honorary G-Wings by the group commander. Absolutely amazing, absolutely surreal. So,
and you can barely see down here, but some of the cadets were they were banging on plates, and they were there was somebody was lifting a table. But I mean, I've banged on my plate as a cadet too, but I've never seen the lifting of tables.
But
So that was the biggest applause that we'd seen from the cadet wing in quite some time.
Curtis brought down the house. They were so thrilled to have him there, and the reception was just absolutely amazing. So in the spirit of today and the event, I think it's only appropriate that I go ahead and wear these for the presentation. And these are the G-Wings that I earned when I was a cadet. And it's just one more way to carry on that legacy, again, which is just remarkable to even be here today. So next slide, please. So my story begins in the spring and summer of 1998, Boulder, Colorado. Already had a penchant for vintage because I was taking black and white photos. My dad took this photo back then, and I was into developing black and white photos. So it almost looks period correct. But I started flying gliders during the spring of my senior year in high school. And that's pictures of me soloing. The picture there on the right is my first solo in March of 1998. And then there's a picture of me flying with my dad. So, you know, soaring started early in my life as a high school student. And I knew that I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And I knew that there was a soaring program at the Air Force Academy. And even before I entered, I had a goal that I wanted to be a cadet soaring instructor pilot. So the pictures here show you what the flight line looked like circa 1999, flying the old Schweitzer TG-4As, or the civilian designation 233. They were nothing graceful, but they are fantastic, robust ships that could just take a beating from cadets and just keep on going. And with a little dope that I'm sure Curtis would be happy to do, a little structural repair work and some new dope and paint, and they're good to go. So really a fantastic, robust training sailplane. And those pictures there are from actually my first solo on 6 July 1999 in an Air Force aircraft. And that was my instructor awarding me my solo wings here at the Academy. So like I said, I wanted to be a soaring instructor pilot. I applied for that and was fortunately picked up for the opportunity. I had to wait till the spring semester of my my sophomore year before I could start the upgrade because of my course load was just so great here at the Air Force Academy. But hit it with force. And I earned my G-Wings in the summer of 2000. We had to fight weather, as Andrew mentioned. You know, Charles Lindbergh said it was great weather for training, but he wasn't here in the winter, I guess. So anyway, or in February and March of the year, or in the rainy season and the thunderstorms in the summer. But anyway, we got through it, and I earned my G-Wings on 13 July 2000, which will be another circuitous, weird connection in a bit that has surprised us. So then what's next? Loved instructing in the gliders, but there was an opportunity to apply for the advanced soaring programs. And at that time, we just called it the cross country soaring team. Now it's the soaring racing team, or the sailplane racing team. At the time, we had the Schweitzer 126E, named the TG-3A. And this one in particular, this serial number 641 was called Thunder 2. And I flew that quite a bit that summer, and I absolutely fell in love with that little airplane. Keep going there. So there's a picture of me on my first land out. That was my longest duration and longest or highest altitude gain day, all the silver badge accomplishments. And then there's a land out in Ionia, Michigan at the 126 championships. But just a fantastic little airplane, nothing fancy at all, relatively low performance, you know, published 23-to-1 glide ratio. But it was something that we gained an immense amount of airmanship in, and the confidence of putting an airport at your back with no engine really showed you what you're capable of without an engine. And truly what is remarkable about what the World War II glider pilots did. So this is something that starts to take hold. And I'm fortunate enough to earn the same G-Wings, fly gliders, and have this experience of learning the capabilities of an engineless aircraft. So we move on through my cadet career. Labor Day 2001. This is in the old hangar, the good old TG-4s and the TG-3 there. Once again, my favorite, Thunder 2, tail number 641. And that's me and my mom. And I was scheduled to land on the parade field that day before the parents' weekend day, or parents' weekend parade over Labor Day. And unfortunately, it got rained out.
And I have heard that quite a few times. So he is maybe still a little bit better about it.
But nevertheless, I did get to practice once, and I landed that airplane on the parade field. One of the coolest things I was fortunate enough to do as a cadet, and that will forever be etched in my memory. But it was, again, in Thunder 2. And that's a point that I want to say, is that even at this stage in my life in 2001, I thought, you know, there's a lot ahead in my career, but you know what? I like this little airplane. And if there was a chance to own a glider someday, I'd like a 126. And, you know, it'd be cool if there was an opportunity at some point that this glider would become available. That would be amazing. But what are the chances that a surplus glider would show up on the market at any time in history? And with all the regulatory deals or details that have to be dealt with the Warbird. So anyway, that was, you know, a dream put on pause, just something still just burning dimly in the back of my head. But then I went on to pilot training, flew the KC-135. My dad took that picture on a departure when I was leaving out of McConnell one day on a mission. And my first assignment was actually in England. I flew with the 100th Air Refueling Wing, which traces its lineage back to the 100th Bomb Group. And what's unique about this is that this is the only unit in the Air Force that still carries that displays a World War II insignia. So now there's this weird thing that keeps coming back. And I didn't see it at the time, but later on it becomes so significant that I had these connections to World War II, my flying career, the G-Wings, the square D on the tail, the B-17s carried that insignia on their tail. It's just remarkable. And I was so proud of that fact that I flew an airplane that still carried that legacy. And through my career, I flew the tanker for 3 assignments, was an instructor at the schoolhouse in Altus Air Force Base. And then now I'm actually assigned to the FAA, and I fly flight inspection for the Air Force, but in that little blue aircraft in the lower left. And that's a Challenger 605. And we inspect navigation aids and instrument approaches. So we do this around the world. I just got back from Iraq and Jordan and Qatar and one other, Kuwait, about a month ago, and doing this mission for the Air Force. So that's a pretty unique niche there. And that traces its lineage back to the Army Airways communication system in World War II. So just one more thing where this passion is gaining momentum. So next slide, please. Then July 2013 comes along. Been in Germany for a couple years on an assignment, non-flying assignment, working tanker plans, and I met a friend.
And I was working in as a logistics planner in the Air Operations Center. So otherwise, we probably wouldn't have met each other if we hadn't been on a non-flying assignment. But working logistics and in the air mobility division. And I am also a grad, but I never went to the airfield as a cadet. So I only thing I knew about gliders was that the Air Force Academy had them, and that they were really cool, and then that they were used in World War II, and then that was about it. So, but being in Germany, there are so many glider ports around, and there's just so much just soaring lineage in Germany that if you're with someone who actually knows what they're talking about, then you can learn so much just by walking around and looking at things. So Colin did a great job of introducing me to soaring then. And then I taught, we went on a bunch of different trips together, and we actually, I talked you into coming with me to please come with me when I bought a Vespa. Vespa was my European souvenir. I wanted to take something back from my assignment in Europe. And for me and my interest in cars and then in art, design, and scooters, I really wanted a Vespa. So we went and found one. And then the next weekend, Colin took me out and we took this picture. And this is actually when we got the K-13.
Yeah, the next weekend, actually. So this is a 1972 German training glider, which now starts to connect an interest in training and getting back into gliders. So moving on, I end up with an assignment sent to Altus, Oklahoma. Not necessarily the first choice of location, but that's where I was an instructor in the KC-135. So, you know, you make lemonade, right? And I found out about this really unique place in Frederick, Oklahoma. It's about 50 miles from where I lived. And I heard about that they have a C-47, actually two, and they're in an original World War II hangar, and they were on a 9-day static line jump school in a field in Oklahoma. So I said, okay, I've got to do that. And having come from Germany, having done a lot of World War II history tours while I was there, I said, okay, it's all starting to come again full circle. And so I did the course. That's me on my 6th jump. My dad took that, jumping out from 1,500 feet static line out of a C-47 in Oklahoma. And that's my class, and we go through in replica gear. So, you know, now we're coming back again, World War II history, aviation, airborne. And it's, again, kind of, I'm surprising myself with what I'm doing and how things are coming full circle. So next slide. 2019 was an amazing year. We had the opportunity to, things lined up, and I was able to cross the channel on a C-47. That's a 3-ship of C-47s there, flanked by 2 P-51s, a P-47, and 2 Beech-18 chase ships. We came in, and I took off out of Duxford in the back of that C-47, that lead one, and I got to actually jump into Drop Zone Kilo near Santerville and commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So that was just unbelievably special. And I also jumped my G-Wings into there as well too. And while we were there, when I saw a little model of a CG-4, I couldn't resist. I had to take a picture, and I pinned on my silver wings, because this is where it started to take hold of, I want to tell this story. I'm in getting associated with a group that is interested in World War II airborne history. And this is an amazing avenue based upon my history and my interest that I want to tell this story and keep that glider legacy going. So next slide, please. We kept the momentum going through 2019. We went to Holland. We jumped into Erda. There's a field where gliders landed. We found a monument. Just absolutely amazing history. I even put together a glider uniform impression there, because there was a horse on display in front of the Hotel Hartenstein. And so again, this desire to tell this history and tell this story the best we can. So now with that in mind, here we come. Things are starting to coalesce. Getting back into soaring, which goes back to my high school, my cadet days. That leads us into an organization called the Vintage Sailplane Association. Then I'm doing this World War II stuff, jumping out of planes at a World War II hangar. That's the World War II Airborne Demonstration Team. So we're meeting a bunch of like-minded people. And then that all comes back to the beginning. Here I am, a cadet, wearing these wings. That's the same patch in the stadium at a home football game. And it's all coming full circle. But then as the career progressed, I've always thought, man, what if that little glider turned up? And it was never a dedicated search, but it was always something in the back of my head. You know what, maybe if that showed up, that would be a pretty cool little thing to have and fly. But then a funny thing happened. So this is spring, summer of 2018. I saw a listing for a World War II TG-3.
It was a Schweitzer.
It was a Schweitzer, and I flew a Schweitzer TG-3. It was a 1975 TG-3. This was a 1942 TG-3. I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. But you know, it's not the one that I had my heart set on, but wow, this is still something special. And with the interest in World War II history, vintage gliders, now, wow, here's an opportunity. At the time, it was way too expensive. Then it came down 25%. Then it came down 50%. Then it came down another 3,000. And we started to go, you know what? With all the things we're doing, this is something special. We wanted to try, we start seeing this vision of, we want to make this history tangible. And if if there's an airworthy example of an aircraft that can connect that, because there's not a CG-4A that's airworthy. So the next best thing maybe we can do is get a training glider and bring this to people and create an experience that invigorates that fire to learn more, to start reading, to do research, to join organizations and get involved. So next. So weekend at Frederick, we start talking about it. We have a great time, late night of conversation, and a lot of encouragement happens. People tell me, you know what, this is important. This is something that that you should pursue. So next. This is the Bay Area in 2018, August, and I'd heard this is airworthy, but you know, what does that actually mean when you see a listing? It could be steel pile parts, it could be shredded fabric. So I thought, okay, I better go take a look at this and see what condition. Turns out this is essentially a barn find. This had been in storage here for since 1989, so 30 years this had been sitting here in a hangar, and it was actually in quite good condition. Now, it had some modifications done during its life. It's not perfectly stock, but those are all things that can be worked on later.
Yeah.
So here we go. We've got this amazing old training glider that is a potential, but
but it's wooden fabric.
It's wooden fabric, and I want to have something airworthy to tell the story and not necessarily a static display. So that's when, through the Vintage Sailplane Association, you find out to call the wood guy. And so this is a friend of ours, Chad Willie. He came out and he inspected.
Sorry,
the
Chad,
aircraft.
but we didn't have another photo of you.
Yeah, but he restored that that glider, Midwest Utility. He came out, he took a look, and he inspected the spar and said, yeah, it's good. So good, solid wood spar, and we moved on.
Yep. So then in December, we went out to California and we went and picked it up. Now, I did say in December, and we were trying to take it back to Oklahoma. So there are some mountains between California and Oklahoma. So to get it back was actually going to be the issue, because this is Brooke, and he's the one who restored it, and then he's the one who sold it to us, and it had been a member of his family since he restored it. So we really needed to get it back to Oklahoma, but the problem was that it's also, if you look at the trailer that it's on, that's also the original trailer. So the trailer is also from 1942, yeah. And so getting it, maybe driving that on the road and driving it over the mountains in the poor weather is probably not a good activity. So in my job, in logistics, I learned how to move things and plan things out. So in my current job, I work for a car company, and I actually work with the logistics of some of the prototype cars. So I actually knew a group of people that could help us move a one-of-a-kind vehicle, and that's exactly how I phrased it when I called them. So they came out to California. They put it in an enclosed trailer. That was Nate helping us put it in there, get it all secured. And then they took it back to Texas. And it spent some time in a shop along with a couple of cars, or one of the Supra right there. It hung out in the back, and had a couple of modifications done to it, because as soon as the mechanics saw the wheels and saw the tires that were on those wheels, they said that, oh, I think these wheels are also original, and you're not taking this and actually using it as a trailer on those wheels. So they got us some new wheels, and we hooked it up to the car, and we found it a good place to go. But
that was dry.
That was dry
and safe because it's wood,
and it was close, because we didn't really want to go very far with it. Well, in August 2020, we finally made all of the plans.
Something happened in between. We got busy.
Yeah, but in August 2020, we made all the plans to actually move it from Texas up to Oklahoma, so we could be closer to both our Soaring Association in Oklahoma, and then also our Vintage Sailplane Association friends who are up in Wichita. So who were actually like the groups of people that were actually going to be able to help us restore this and get it back to flying. So we spent some time making the trailer as roadworthy as we could, fixed the lights, made sure everything was tied down, put in some giant gust locks on some giant wings. And yep, those clouds, kind of ominous. Yep, very true.
And that's how you feel after a day of dealing with an old trailer.
So once we finally got it all hooked up and ready to go, we took an open trailer from Texas to Oklahoma. If you've ever trailered an open trailer, you know that things move, because when you're in the chase car, which is this RAV4 here, you get to watch every bit of it move as you're driving down the road.
Dust locks come off.
And every time the wind blows and every time a car passes. And it was probably the most harrowing, what was it, supposed to be 3 hours, took us more like 5. So, but we finally got it home and got it safe. So it's now in Oklahoma. It's safe and dry, and waiting for us to put the plans together, finalize the plans for the next move with it. But now that you know we have it, let's tell you a little bit more about the TG-3 itself.
And to Bruce and Patricia, I'm sorry, I know we're running a little bit late with the technical glitch and clearing the room out. We'll try to wrap this up in about 5 minutes here to get on with the rest of the symposium. So so I'll move kind of quickly here. What I wanted to show you here is that, okay, this airplane is something unique. It's a World War II airplane, but why is it special and why is it rare? What makes it unique? So let's just step back real quick. This is a picture from December 1929 in Germany. This is a shot cord launch. People would have a bungee cord run along and launch a glider like they're actually running with a bungee cord. And these flights would attain tens of feet and fly maybe tens of feet in altitude for tens of seconds or less of flight, and travel only a few hundred feet. But that's how training happened. It was open. It says the elements and no instruments. So then at that point, 38, PC gliders were not. On your area in Germany or overseas, so in to create a
your video is freezing and you're giving us some audio problems.
Here, but it's to be used as a 2-seat trainer. But you can see how things have gotten more robust. We have an enclosed cockpit. We have 2 seats. There's an instructor in there. So many more things are coming along. This is an aluminum spar. They're stronger aircraft. So with this advent of a new trainer and leading into the pre-war period of 38 to 41, that's when the Army Air Forces took notice. And in May 1940, Eben Amel was attacked by the Germans, and that Belgian fortress was taken very quickly. That's when the Army Air Forces said, wow, we really, really need to take this seriously. So in February 1941, Hap Arnold reached out and said, we need to prepare a study. By April, the study was complete. And Major Fred Dent appeared in Elmira and went to the Schweitzers and said, the Schweitzer brothers, to this company and said, you know what, war is on the horizon. We need a training glider and we need it fast because General Arnold needs gliders in this coming war. So that quickly organized by June of 41, the Elmira area Soaring Corporation to stand up the Army glider school, and then in Lockport, Illinois, another glider school. They trained 6 officers each at that time to start an initial cadre of instructors. I'd also like to note at this time, there were only about 197 glider pilots in the country at this point, and the nation projected they wanted 6,000 by the end of 42. So we're behind and trying to catch up immediately. And that's when the Schweitzer 2.8, which you saw on the previous slide, was ordered by the Army Air Forces to be produced and go straight into military service. Next slide, please. So other training gliders were built by some other companies. You got the TG-2, but the Frankfurt TG-1 and the Leicester Kaufman TG-4. All those were good training gliders, but they were sailplanes. They were built for performance and they were modified from previous designs or single seat designs or an existing design. But at the time, none of these were deemed to be the correct fit for the training that was needed for the glider pilots. So by the end of November 1941, the Army Air Forces said, we need a new glider. We need something that meets specific requirements with improved visibility for the instructor. That means the wing was lowered, because before the wing was up by the shoulders of the instructor and it blocked their peripheral vision. And we need to build it with non-strategic materials. That means wood, a wood spar, not aluminum like it was before. But then some other things that Schweitzer included were rudder trim for dual tow. So when they were towing together, you could put some trim in and relieve stick forces and to be able to fly in formation safer. Navigation lights for night training, a wheel brake, which was a disc brake, which is could be arguably the first time a disc brake was used in a glider, and a higher max speed of 100 miles per hour, where before the TG-2 was around in the 70 mile per hour range. So this is looking for a more robust training glider that meets bespoke requirements for the Army Air Forces with better visibility and using non-strategic materials. Next slide, please. So then we move into 1942, 29 Palm stands up. We start training a lot more gliders. Roger Smith talked about this, and it was an amazing feat. We're using 2.8s. Everything is still in flux. We're learning what's going on. You got that brochure on the right, or that manual. It says February 43, but it still says tentative. So things are still figuring out and what the requirements are. And you can see there, that bottom picture is a picture of a dual tow, winch tow, auto tow. So again, all of these requirements that the TG-3 is being designed for are things that are being implemented in these initial schools. Next slide, please. So then in May 1942, the first prototype CG-4 rolls out. Concurrently, the first TG-3 was delivered as well too. And now suddenly people start to evaluate the CG-4 and realize that the CG-4 doesn't fly anything like the training sailplanes, which were built for performance. So really it's not negative transfer, but it's not the appropriate choice of training for this need. So that's when quickly the Army Air Forces evaluates that a new plan needs to happen. So they call the director of the Civil Aeronautics Authority, which is the precursor to the FAA, that's Charles Stanton. They call him and say, is there any way that we can leverage civil industry at this time to meet this need? Because we just can't get the gliders built fast enough and we can't put enough people through fast enough. So what else can we do? And then that leads into Charles Stanton called a RONCA. They took existing light aircraft and modified the nose. They removed the engine, put a new cockpit on, so essentially replaced a person with the engine. Now this allowed 3 people to fly in there. There's 1 student in the front, instructor in the back, and then another student in the far aft seat. This is something that enhanced training because there could be an observer, but these gliders actually were more congruent in performance with the CG-4. And people even had joked at this point that a Piper Cub looks more like a CG-4 in plan form. So maybe these things would perform similarly. So next slide. There you see, that's a Piper TG-8. It looks very similar in plan form to CG-4. It's just a mini glider. And these things performed very similarly. And then this led to a shift in the training philosophy, where, as Roger talked about with the dead stick schools, you start learning just the initial engine out procedures. Then you move into going to a sailplane school, one of the advanced schools, or like the elementary advanced schools, and actually getting to fly tow, because that was important. Then ultimately going on to an advanced school with the CG-4. Next slide, please. So then late 1942 to July 1943, production continues on the TG-3, and they're finished by 1943. 22 were delivered by the end of 1942. The final TG-3 was delivered in July 1943. But as we talked about, the first CG-4 and the first TG-3 coincided. The requirements were not congruent, or the training methods were not congruent. And then that leads into the CG-4 being delivered and actually being fielded and figuring out how we need to train it. Those little TG, the other TG-5, 6, and 8 coming online, shift in the training philosophy. And then that kind of leaves by July 43, when the last one rolls off the line. nobody wants to use a sailplane anymore because they're actually too good for what the glider pilots need to know. It doesn't simulate the performance of what they're going to do. Instead of taking off, towing for a short time and staying up as long as you can, you take off, tow a long time, and then gracefully
Fall quickly
to the ground with a heavy load. So suddenly the TG-3 ends up kind of as an orphan, and it doesn't really have a home, and it then becomes strangely lost to history. So we know a lot about why this airplane existed. You can read books by the Schweitzer brothers and learn about the genesis of this aircraft and many other great resources about books and articles about the World War II glider program. But this in particular by Ernest Schweitzer, the designer of the aircraft, it has an incredible description of what the airplane is and why it was designed. But then the trail goes cold. And there are very small references in Norman Grimm's book, To Fly the Gentle Giants. That was, he has 4 locations that I found, and it was Plainview, Amarillo, La Mesa, Texas, and Bonita, Oklahoma. I've seen references of where the TG-3 was used, but it was such a small snapshot, and some probably were just left crated and never actually fielded. So next slide, please. After the war, they became surplus. And as training gliders moved into the future, the military training pilots had seen the advantage of a 2-seat glider at this point and knew that that was the way forward. The manufacturers knew that was the way forward and wanted to design 2-seat training gliders to meet this post-war soaring market. Well, unfortunately, unfortunately, is that these surplus gliders, we had about 197 before the war, and now we have 1,000 2-seat, we had no 2-seat gliders before the war, maybe about 4 with the 2.8s that had built. Now we've got over 1,000 2-seat gliders, and they just flood the market at bargain basement prices. So these gliders had each been about $4,000 each to the government, and they're sold off for somewhere between $350 to $600. And I can prove that ours sold for $101 cash in 1946 with a trailer. So at this point, what do we know about this plane? We know its model number, its serial number, and the trailer number, and its Air Force identification. But like I said, the trail goes pretty cold on what this glider did and how it was used. But then again, in the post-war environment, it becomes this beloved trainer because it's affordable, it's cheap, it's, clubs can fly it, they can beat it up, it's robust, it's as robust as the 233 or the TG-4 that I flew when I was a cadet, and the TG-3 that I flew as a cadet. So this thing is just a tank, but the problem is that it's a wooden wing and it sits outside because people are unlikely to hangar for $50 a month hangar fee for a $500 glider. So at this point, these are unfortunately left out. They are exposed to the elements, and the spars, the wooden spars, rot. So ironically, the one feature of building with a non-strategic material for this glider is the Achilles heel that made them so rare and destroyed them. But in the post-war environment, again, they became just a huge boon to the civil soaring movement as a trainer. Like I said, just a few weeks ago, I was flying with some friends who had learned in TG-3s in Kansas, even up until I think in the 80s as well, too.
Yeah, everyone talks about them very fondly.
And then finally, it set some records as well after the war in 1950. Betsy Woodward set over 10,700 foot altitude record, a woman's soaring record. And then the Harold Ross set I think that was, it's like the 31,600 feet record. And it was also instrumental in the Sierra Wave Project, exploring the mountain wave phenomenon and the jet stream. So it was a very important glider in its post-war service. That really helped further the sport of soaring and training for that matter. So now, where are we? You know about why this glider was built, where it is now, why they're so rare. And I'll tell you that there's 2 known to be airworthy. One is in Oregon with the Western Antique Airplane and Automobile Museum. And then there's this one. It hasn't flown in over 30 years, but it's got an airworthy spar, and we're confident that it's going to be ready because the wood guy says it's good. So, so with that note, the story continues. And these are our 2 TG-3s. So the capstone of this is that in the meantime, we did find Thunder 2, and it is part of the family as well. And what's special about this is when we talk about the legacy of this training, that we have 2 Schweitzer TG-3s that served the US Air Force. Of course, separated by many, many decades, 1942 to 1975 when they were built. But still, these are remarkable examples of that heritage of military training, of Air Force glider training. So they're not ready to fly at this point, but this is just the first chapter of our story. And we hope to come back in the future and have these available to fly. Because like we said, this vision of legacy, we want these to be available to the public as a tangible experience, that you can actually see these aircraft that were flown in training and have produced pilots that went on to do incredible things, and also the maintainers, everyone that touched these, what they did and how they contributed to the war effort, whether it was decades ago or it continues into the future. So with that, I want to say, again, being grads and being here is such a special experience and coming full circle. So as Cole Resnick said earlier today, he hopes that his research can inspire people to understand their legacy. Andrew Kreitz also said that he wants this people to understand the importance of what is happening here. So we've got this great legacy, the opportunity to hear these unbelievable stories from people like Roger Smith and Curtis Cameron. But now it's up to us, the people that are here today, to hear those stories, to carry on that legacy and tell that to the next generation, to the glider pilots that are here today that are building that history. They're writing it right now with what they're doing down at the field and starting the careers of so many people in aviation. It's up to them to take these stories into the future. And we are just absolutely thrilled again to have the opportunity to be here, to be a part of this story and contribute to this legacy. And we can't wait to see where this goes, working with everyone into the future to tell the story of the World War II glider pilots.
Sorry about going over, Bruce.
Colin and Brodie, it sounds like you've had quite a journey, and we really appreciate you sharing it with us.
And like we said, it is not over yet. We haven't started on that thing yet, so.
And we look forward to the next installment.
All right.
Sure.
Again, sorry for running late, but
That's fine. That's fine. It was well worth it.